Okay, hello everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Today's guest is a lawyer and longtime resident of Israel and a serious student of ancient Jewish texts. After decades of observing deep social, political, and religious divides, he set out to examine some of the biggest questions of life, not emotionally, but rationally. He's the author of Fundamentally Rational, a book that explores religion, creation, morality, and meaning through a logical lens. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much, Blessed. Great to be here. I hope I'll be of use and benefit, and hopefully people enjoy and find this useful.
Yes. So
Um,
before we kick things off, can you please tell us a little bit more about yourself?
um, I don't have any great adventures or accomplishments that really per se. I was born not in, I live in Jerusalem, Israel now, as you said in the introduction. Thank you. I practice as a lawyer, and I'm a religious, ultra-Orthodox Jew. I'm a member of that community. That's where we live. That's everything we do is part of that community, the ultra
Yes.
religious community in Israel. I practice, like I said, as a lawyer. I spend a lot of my time also studying the religious texts, which is considered a primary religious privilege and duty, and try to, as much as possible, also put these into practice to be consistent with what I learn. How I got here, I wasn't born in Israel, as you can hear from my accent. I was born in Scotland, United Kingdom.
Yes.
Um, my parents who were Orthodox, more Orthodox in the community there, sent me at the age of 12 to to have a Jewish Orthodox education, religious education in England, Manchester. From there, I went and studied, after I matriculated there, at the age of 18, I studied in Israel for a couple of years it's called yeshiva in rabbinical college. I then went back
Yes.
to England, studied law, came back to Israel, got married, and
No.
I've been living in Israel since then. For a number of years, I was full time studying rabbinical studies. Not actually a rabbi, qualified rabbi, but I studied the works and the texts. I then qualified as a lawyer. I also worked for a couple of years as a computer programmer when I
Oh wow.
decided I didn't like law, found it a bit contentious. But
Yes.
after that, I worked in a government office. After that, I went back to law, maybe a little bit more mature. Partly because working in law afforded me more time to devote to my religious activities and studies. Working in
Yes.
high tech as a programmer required me to work a minimum of 9, 10 hours a day, which I thought was too much. Um,
Actually.
Right, that's me personally. My interests are primarily like studying the religious texts and trying to be a good person, a good Jew. I've developed maybe a slightly more rational approach based on my studies. The study of the Talmud is quite a rationally orientated enterprise. So I've
Yes.
developed a sort of rational approach to analyzing many things. And I've also developed a concern for many things. Um, how much of use that is, I don't know to anyone else, but I've tried to put it into some form of limited um, effect. And like you say, I've written two books. One is like I wouldn't call it an apology, but irrational. The one you've described is a description of religion, primarily the Jewish religion, but maybe
Yes.
monotheism to a certain extent for the general population from a rational perspective. To
Yes.
try to explain it rationally, that people should be able to engage and relate to the rational claims and principles of religion. That's one work. The other book I've written recently was a response to primarily to anti-Semitism, which has been on the rise significantly in the last 2 years since the events of October the 7th. I don't know if you know what October the 7th refers to.
I think I remember that was the bombing that happened
Right.
in I can't remember the name of this. Is it Hamas or
Yeah,
where?
it was Hamas attacked Israel. It was a terrible
Yes.
terrorist attack. Happened on the
Yes.
Sabbath, on the last day of the festival, 2 years ago. Like horrific attack. 50, like
Yes.
one.
There was a video. There was a video of the attack on the internet. It was a bomb explosion. It was
No, it was more than a
just I
bomb. It
can't
was like
even.
it was hundreds of and thousands of terrorists. It was like almost like a war. It was like a
Oh
sadistic war.
wow.
Yeah, and the world basically, I think the geopolitics has been in never been the same since then. The whole world has
Yes,
been in uproar and geopolitical tensions in America, in Europe, in Israel, in the Arab world as a result of that attack and the Israeli response, which has been ongoing. And there's been a lot of debate. Was the Israeli response, appropriate? Was it over? A lot of Palestinians have been killed, unfortunately, because it's never good.
yes,
And this has seen a lot of rising anti-Semitism throughout the world. So I, in response to that, I've written a book that also tries to take a rational look at what's going on, to try and cool down the emotions and try and understand what's going on. Maybe as a result of contemplation, to reach positive solutions. I always draw the distinction. On a personal level, I relate to these things as a religious Jew, which means when these
yes,
terrible things happen, we have to try and introspect to a certain extent. What are we doing wrong? What should we be doing? How can we be in
yes,
service of God and mankind, or man, our fellow Jew, whatever it is, in a better way? But I'm also trying, in some way, maybe in pursuit of that, to take a rational approach and try and understand geopolitical, democratic, the events that are happening, and try to frame them in a rational manner. And from that analysis, that quite intense process I went through, I've reached certain conclusions and understanding and proposed certain solutions as to what the problems are and where perhaps the solutions lie.
oh wow, thank you so much, Daniel. So
Yeah.
the first question I wanted to ask you is, what pushed you to write Fundamentally Rational?
Well, like I mentioned, I feel in Israel and generally there is quite a distinct division between the religious and the non-religious.
Yes,
And
that divide is,
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
even know how to explain, especially, but you would agree with me that
Sorry?
they are religious. Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, I can hear you. Sure. So just I didn't hear what you said.
Okay, I said you would agree with me that for a fact you are one of the, like, I myself, I will consider myself a believer, not necessarily religious per se, but I do believe in God definitely. Now
Yeah.
you are one of the few, rational religious people I've met. Most people are religious fanatics, and you would agree with that for a fact. So I think the divide is usually between the non-religious people and the religious fanatics, but not essentially the religious people that are also rational. I don't know if you understand what I mean.
Yeah, I do understand what you mean. I mean, I know the religious people, and they're not fanatics. They're very all the religious people I know, they're very good moral people, but they're very
Yes,
different to the non-religious people, the secular in Israel. I'm talking, but maybe everywhere. In Israel, it's
yes,
more pronounced because the religious ultra-Orthodox is quite an intensive way of life, so it makes it very different from a secular life. Therefore, there is
yes,
a lot of like mutual suspicion, mutual lack of understanding. The non-religious don't understand the religious way of life, and they view it, therefore, to a certain extent, negatively. It spills into politics, it spills into
yes,
communal issues. So I tried, my motivation was to try and offer, to try and encourage people to think more deeply about these issues and to explain the deeper rationale that lies behind religion. The God, I firmly believe in God, but it's not an irrational belief. I'm trying to present the fact that it's a rational belief. One of the chapters there is on the familiar topic of that it's almost scientifically impossible to conceive a world that could have been created and complex life that could have come into existence without a creator, without a God. It's just,
yes, yes. I 100% agree with that. And let me just cite an example. I remember I was having a conversation with someone, and I cited to them that you need to understand, just looking at our solar system alone would
Mhm,
give you some perspective that there has to be a metaphysical being that was capable of doing this. There has to be a higher intelligence involved in the creation of our universe. Take, for example, our solar system, our galaxy, the Milky Way galaxy, is essentially moving through interstellar space.
mhm,
Our solar system is moving within our galaxy. Our oh my God, our planet is moving within our solar system, within our galaxy.
which
And
is moving.
understand, if Earth was just a little bit close to the sun or just a little
Yeah,
bit away from the
yeah,
sun, life would not exist on the planet.
right, right.
Every planet in our solar system is playing a key role to keep Earth to keep Earth to keep the ability of Earth being able to sustain life constant.
Um,
Now, when you think about all these things and just think about the complexity of life itself, you need to
mhm.
understand that it was something that has been modeled, created, planned by somebody or
Yeah,
some being that we essentially
yeah.
cannot understand. And I then concluded that religion is essentially just a way of us, a way we are trying to, connect with that being, if I'm not mistaken. So that was why I told that person at the time.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, I also approach it from biological. I've looked at in one of the chapters there is describing the complex biology of a human being or any living creation. If you think about how many cells there are in a human being, it's like trillions.
Yes,
20 or 30 trillion cells, which all interact in an integrated, organized way in order to enable biological functioning. So
yes,
to propose that the complex programming of an organism of 23 or 30 trillion cells could possibly have arisen just through some form of random movement over a few
like,
billion years is absolutely impossible. You
yeah,
can't program something
yes,
that complex. Um, in the Jewish religion, we don't just try and relate to it. Our belief is, and as it's recorded, or our knowledge, I would even say, is that God revealed Himself to um, to the children of Israel, as is described in the Bible, and that's we take our belief based on that. Not even if I wouldn't have good logical arguments, we would still believe in God because God revealed Himself to us, and that's
yes,
our religious tradition. But
yes,
nevertheless, that's not a contradiction to saying that correlates with fundamental logic.
yes. So one question I want to ask you is, many people think religion and rationality conflict. What do you believe people tend to misunderstand that causes this belief or this
Um,
thinking?
I don't know if it's a lack of understanding or I attribute it to a lack of deep contemplation. That's how I would say it. Since to me, maybe I'm biased, but to me it seems, and like you've also explained fairly clearly, it seems to be a no-brainer that there must be a creator, there must be a God. So how
Yes,
can people arrive at a conclusion that there isn't? It would seem to me through a lack of thinking or a refusal, perhaps, to engage with the thought, which is perhaps overwhelming, because once you contemplate the creator, you're no longer free. You're no longer,
yeah, yeah,
it has many multiple ethical implications. In the book I describe, I sort of say it's possible in some ways. I think the Bible itself, that's what I believe, that the Bible never contemplated genuine anti-atheism or the Talmud. It never even contemplated that people would really believe that we got here from nothing through random events that without a creator. I don't think that's even comes under the realm of irrational belief to say it's just happened. Really, non-belief is actually itself a type of theology. I don't know if we'll be able to get into it. It's quite a deep. It's really a belief there must have been a creator, but it's a
yes,
creator that somehow does not obligate us. Somehow is removed from the world, is not part of the world, does not obligate the world. That's what I attribute. I say when people say I don't believe they don't believe. I don't believe they don't believe.
yeah,
I'm not
yes,
the first person to have said that. I think Jordan Peterson also sort of has articulated that. And they get very offended when you say that. What do you mean I don't believe? I know I don't believe. And I'm saying, don't tell me what I believe. And I'm saying it's not really possible for you, based on the way your general belief system works, to really say that I believe I'm here because of a chance chemical reaction in a primordial soup or something.
yeah,
That's not a really a rational belief based on your own general criteria for what's a rational belief.
yes.
So
So,
yeah. So but maybe but
okay,
it's partly fear. I think that's why people are tend to avoid.
actually, I could say that because, most people, they, how would I put it, not everyone is kind of open-minded to an extent. I am very much open that, and I understand for a fact, it wouldn't make any sense, like I've said before, to believe that there is no superior being that
Mhm.
orchestrated everything we're experiencing today. It wouldn't make any sense because it's just too complex. And to assume that it all came out randomly or it all happened randomly, like you said, from a primordial soup, it's pseudoscience essentially.
It's
Anyways,
scientifically impossible, statistically impossible.
exactly that too. That I think that was just the word I was looking for, the adjective, I believe. So
Mm.
many people say, you believe in something, you have faith in a certain kind of religion or a certain kind of belief. What is your evidence? The first thing, and when I try to when they want to dispute the fact that there is no, they start to come up with different kind of scientific hypothetical explanations and situations that could have prompted everything that we're experiencing today. And so if someone was to ask you, say you have faith, right? You have belief. Where is your evidence that your God exists? How would you reply to such a person?
Hmm. First of all, I'd say science itself has created this paradigm that if you don't have evidence, what science calls evidence, then you haven't proved the theorem.
Yes,
Um, so first of all, something that's so obvious, that's so blatant, that could not be otherwise, that is the evidence. That really is the primary evidence, that it could not be otherwise, based on scientific criteria, based on the criteria that science itself proposes and argues generally. When you see something, when you see a human being, there's no rational account for how such a complex being. I could start going like I went into numbers a little bit. Um, if you want to, I'm happy like maybe to talk a little bit about numbers. The theory of evolution, taking the most basic um, version that it was based,
yes.
evolution was based.
Sorry, before we continue, can I just interject? So I
Sure.
want to just let you know that we literally have as enough time as you can spare. So you can
Uh,
explain, you can dive in, we can go
uh,
in as deep as we need to. I'm actually very much interested in this conversation. And
uh,
yeah, so you can take your time
well,
with with every explanation and everything you want to say.
That's very kind. I appreciate that. I don't want to take too much of your time or your listeners' time. I also maybe
Yes.
have to, and I probably after a while I start not talking sense anymore. So I probably have to limit it for that reason. My brain stops working logically
Yeah.
maybe after a while. Um,
As the saying goes, we are only human.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. We are only human and we make mistakes, and I might not say everything that's completely rational, but I base it in the book. There's many arguments that could be made, but if I take, I didn't, we're going to get into this, but if we take evolution, we look at evolution, the evolution of complex beings. Um, Let me take one. Let me start the one what I call the Lucy argument that allegedly man evolved from Homo sapiens evolved from a, a- a- an
Apes.
an interim version of apes, and the closest version is just for the sake of convenience is referred to maybe as Lucy, that magic missing link. It's called Lucy. That was the iteration of the apes that was the interim between the apes and man. So I say like this. I look at the time frame. I say how many cells are there in an ape? About 20 trillion as well. 20 trillion cells that are all functioning and in an integrated manner to keep the ape going. And there's 22 trillion cells in man. But
Yes.
almost every system in man and in the apes are fundamentally are very different. The eyes,
Yes.
the muscles, the brain, the arms, the tissues, every organ. You would have to work very hard to transplant. It has maybe been done with huge amounts of medical intervention to transplant an ape's stomach or heart or kidneys or liver, whatever you want, into a man, or his lymph system or his defensive mechanism, whatever it is. His ears,
Yes.
his eyes, they're all different, which means the evolution from ape to man must have involved the evolution of every single one of these biological systems. And every
Yes.
single one of these cells themselves has to be accounted for. Every cell is basically different, slightly different, but it's certainly different. And every arrangement of cells and every combination of cells is different. So you have to account for essentially 22 trillion, I don't know why I'm saying 22, 20 trillion changes that were programmed in the course of that evolution. Now, let's take the basic thesis. How did it work? You had, according to the evolutionary theory, you had perhaps through some um, genetic,
Chance.
yeah, some,
Awesome. Yeah.
yeah, no, some genetic, um,
Mutation.
yeah, I've forgotten the word, some genetic error that occurred in the birth of an offspring
Okay,
that
genetic abnormally.
yeah, abnormally or yeah. They cause a slight error, a fortuitous and chance error that produced an advantageous adaptation in that child. And the theory is that that child then went on through that adaptation to be successful and it outmaneuvered the rest of its generation. Somehow it propagated itself. And that became the new iteration of the apes. And that continued down till man based on ecological and circumstances, biological circumstances that made it more advantageous.
Oh, wow. That's very assumptuous.
Right. So, but first of all, if you have a chance change in, let's take a just a simple example. We'll bring out this principle, which I'm sure you're aware of. Let's take a complex computer program like Word or Excel
Yes.
with millions of lines of code, and let's randomly introduce one line of code that has been just completely this different by chance, not written to integrate with the code, but just different. What's the most likely? And you'd introduce that to the code of Word or Excel. So what would happen to your Word or Excel program?
Definitely there will be an error in the system and it wouldn't function.
Absolutely. And would it
Yes.
produce, is it likely to produce an advantageous change? It's almost
Uh,
impossible.
there's
However many
there's
times you would do it.
a 0% chance, literally.
Yeah, yeah. If you'd run it till the end of the universe, the next 20
Yeah.
billion years, it wouldn't happen. But let's say somehow it did happen. But how many times would, and then you produce one generation, one iteration of the apes or Word or Excel that was slightly better. But how many times
Yeah.
does that have to happen between the apes and man to account for the 22 trillion changes that have occurred?
It will literally be infinity plus one.
And but let's look at the time frame. How long does it take for a generation of apes to develop, a new generation?
I think they said about 300 years or so, if I'm not mistaken.
Well, for an offspring to generate is like 10, 20 years. Each generation is 10, 20 years. And how long
Oh,
would it
okay.
take, let's say, for that whole generation, let's say, to acquire that attribute? I don't know, okay, 10 generations, 300 years. But how
Yes.
many times does that have to occur to account for the number of changes between the apes and the man? Thousands or
Well,
millions of times,
yes, yes, yes,
each one
actually.
incremental. Now, the best estimate, I think, according to biology and not ecology, archaeology, whatever, biological archaeology is like we've got 7 million years. Let's give it 7 million years or 5 million years from Lucy to man. So that doesn't
Yes.
give time for that many millions of
It's
generations to have evolved.
yes.
You also have to account for the fact that there would be millions of interim iterations of apes between Lucy and man. Millions of generations of iterations of versions of the apes that survived for a few hundred or thousand years till they produced a better version. Where are all these interim versions? We've got three or four, maybe five or six. We should have millions. We should
Oh,
be
wow.
tapping for millions and billions that are just not there.
Yes.
So,
Wow.
so, so there's no logic. It's completely illogical to try and assume that occurred just naturally, like we're saying, on the basis of selective natural selection. That's a very
Yes.
concise version of that particular aspect of the argument.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Can I say something before you continue? There's
Sure,
an
sure.
example you,
Yeah,
you
talk.
cited
I've
that
talked
I
enough. I've
just
talked enough. Yeah.
there's an example you cited that I love so much. You talked about how, you use Microsoft Word or
Yeah.
Excel as an example, using
Yeah.
the code, for example. And
Yeah.
I spoke with someone, he's also a scientist like you. Or you're a scientist, if I'm not mistaken. Yes,
No,
of
I'm
course you
interested
are.
in science. I'm interested in science is logical, so I'm interested in the logic of science.
Okay, okay, okay. Okay, so he's essentially a scientist, and he said DNA is essentially code.
Yeah, it
It is
must be.
just, he's also quite religious. So he said
Uh,
DNA is God's code. And like he
absolutely.
said, if you input, a random line of code into a sequence of lines of code, and you're expecting it to, by some semblance of a chance, produce something superior to what already exists, it's going to take millions of times of or years of iteration, of which at the
Mhm.
end of the day, there's still going to be a 0% chance of that happening. If
Right.
I were to apply the same logic to a human being who essentially formed from DNA, which is also millions, if not trillions, of lines of code,
Oh,
it's bound to say, I hope I'm correct. I hope I'm correct by saying that human beings are from DNA is like millions of lines of code, if I'm not
let's
mistaken.
think about it. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's I mean it's fair to say, or it's correct, logically correct to say, if you apply a random line of code in the DNA in the DNA sequence of code, definitely it wouldn't produce anything. It's just be an error. If anything, you would have a mutated human being that has a
Mutation,
lesser
mutation.
chance of surviving,
Yeah,
which is
absolutely,
just
absolutely.
yes,
There's a question. I proposed a question in this model, the scientific model, just as an aside. What is the?
yes,
I was trying to make the best argument for evolution in order to challenge it. So I was asking, what does evolution assume? Does it assume when you have a random change, a mutation, like you said, does that
yes,
produce a small change? Is the best model that you've produced your mutation, your standard mutation, produces a minimal change, like one small change in word, one icon or something, or does it produce a significant change? Which is your best model? So my conclusion was that it can't produce a big change. You can't expect a random mutation to produce a huge change in Word that someone makes a far better version of Word or Excel.
yes,
That's
yes,
absolutely impossible. It has to be the minimum, the smallest amount of change possible for it to be viable, for it to not destroy the program, and maybe have a
yes, yes,
small chance of making a tiny improvement. It has to be the minimal, which creates, but that model creates a bigger problem because then you have to account for multiple versions of Word or man from ape emerging from multiple versions, iterations
yes,
of man to
exactly,
ape.
exactly.
So you have to have millions and billions of these micro changes, each one surviving for a number of generations,
Yes,
overwhelming all that generation, becoming the dominant version of the apes, and then evolving another iteration into the next version. That had to have happened probably billions or trillions of times to account for the 20 trillion differences that are between men and ape.
yes. So, so we've already discussed and answered this next question I'm about to ask, but I'm still going to ask it because I want to see if you have any more perspective or any more
Sure,
lights
sure,
to
sure. You're
share on
asking
it.
good questions. I hope I have good answers.
So, in your view, what is the strongest rational argument for taking religion seriously? Now, also, before you answer, I don't know why, the word religion has been thrown around a lot, and it has gotten
Mhm.
to a point where it's not almost like what's an example I can use? There are some words that you can no longer use anymore because there are now so many interpretations to it. If you say it's a, for example, sorry, I may be getting off topic here, but I just want to essentially make you understand why the word religion needs to be, should I say, it needs to be cleansed. And if there's a way we can just make people understand, okay, this is what religion means. Then
Mhm.
if you're talking about probably extremism or something else, that's just, or fanaticism, that's something else entirely. But
Yeah.
there are people that are religious and that practice religion. There are still, regular people like you and I that are good, that are fine, that are rational and all. So essentially, what is your strongest rational argument for taking religion seriously?
That can be interpreted in two ways. The first way is what is the most rational argument that religion is true? What's the best argument religion is true? And I think we've touched on that. There must be a creator. And I
Yes,
guess
definitely.
once you're saying there must be a creator, so he must have created us for a reason. Or I would say more than that. If there is a creator, then implicitly we must be subordinate to the creator. We almost, by definition, have to serve him. We may feel we have the choice, but when you create something, when you create a computer programmer, computer program, or any creation, that creation essentially is dependent on you.
Yes,
So religion essentially is just the rational recognition of the fact that if there is a creator, you are implicitly subordinate and beholden to that creator. That's
yes,
maybe I would think about it again. I would have a different answer. That's on the rational argumentation why it should be. That's why religion has to be true, essentially. Judaism, from my perspective, or but also there's religion
yes,
for the world. But as to why it's so important, because I don't think the world can sustain without religion. That's the other
yes,
answer to your question.
yes,
I argue
yes,
in the book because in order for the world to survive, society to endure and to be coherent and not just to disintegrate, it has to be that there is ethics and people are genuinely compassionate and concerned about fellow human beings.
exactly. Yes.
So if that's not
Um,
grounded in religion, it becomes very difficult to
yes,
justify and to explain. You can create like sociological and anthropological cases for the evolution maybe of cooperative societies and things like that. That man evolved a genetic predisposition towards being cooperative. But
Yes.
that's not the same as ethics. Ethics is like a responsibility to do what might not be good for me, to sacrifice to a certain extent what's in my
Yes.
best
Yes.
wish for someone else. Society
Yeah.
needs that. Without that, I argue in my second book that without that, society will disintegrate. If everyone is fundamentally selfish,
Yes, actually.
fundamentally, yeah, I don't, and
Eh,
therefore that's why it's so important. And ethics has to come from the belief in one God. That's what we believe. Can't even
Yes.
have paganism. You have to, has to believe in one God because that's
Yes.
a
Yes.
source of ethics and a compassionate humanity.
Yes. This thing you said just reminded me of a conversation I also had with another friend, where I told him that aside the fact that he was making arguments, he was making an argument that religious fanatics are an issue and a problem to society. I was like, well, yes, I agree, but you need to understand that we also need religion. We don't need the fanaticism attached to it, but we need religion and we need religious people. He was like, why do we need religion? I told him that, well, not everyone has the self-awareness to develop a moral compass. Religion is essentially a way to do so. Not everyone can, I don't think it's every human being that's capable of, okay, this is essentially wrong. I shouldn't do this. You understand? Because it's not good. I mean, think about it from a logical and emotional, a biological, any kind of perspective, it's a bad thing to do. But most people, they need to understand, if I do this, God will not be happy with me. My creator will not be happy with me. He has said that we should do this and not do that and not do this. I don't know. And I don't know if that's a fair assessment, if you will.
What do you mean?
Essentially what I told him. Did you think that assessment is fair? That's just my own personal
That
understanding of it.
that it's not enough. Yeah, it's not. You're saying it's not enough to just say we should be good. We should.
No, essentially what I mean is what I was telling him is that religion helps most people, especially people that practice it, to develop a moral compass. And essentially what I was trying to say is I don't think everyone can develop a moral compass if there was no religion. It should just be a few people that actually have some kind of moral compass with existing in society. I don't know if that makes sense.
You're saying it's not sufficient to have just a few religiously orientated people. You're saying society can't sustain with that. Is that what you mean? Everybody has to be religious. Everybody has to
No, no,
be
no, that's not what I mean. What I told
right.
him was he was asking what is the essence of religion. So what
Right.
I was telling him is I said religion allows for people that cannot do it themselves to develop
Ah,
a moral compass
yeah, yeah,
because not
yeah.
everyone is capable of that ability. Not everyone has that level of self-awareness
Yeah,
to
I mean,
develop a moral
yeah,
compass.
yeah. I mean, I go deeper. I say, where does our moral compass come from? And I think the best that so like I alluded to, some people would argue that if the world developed by itself, we evolved, then we evolved somehow a moral compass. But my argument is that the moral compass comes from God, comes from a moral God.
Yes.
Creation itself, that's really where I go deeper, and I say that morality itself comes from God, because God created man, which means there is a creative impulse in creation itself.
Oh, wow.
Creation itself is a product of God's creative essence, or not his essence. We can't speak about God's essence, but God's creative endeavor relative to the world. God created the world. That's how we know God. That's how we know the world, that there was a
Yes.
creator who created it. So therefore, we have the creative impulse. That's the basis of morality, that we are
Oh,
in the
wow.
image of God. We are creative beings. Therefore, essentially, we are programmed fundamentally to be positive, to do good, because creation itself is the greatest act of bestowing something on someone. It's
So essentially, it's if you have a moral compass, it's not because you developed it because of some random chance of evolution. It's essentially probably you just have this, you've been able to tap into your inner self or the inner likeness of God that you have. Then for someone else that needs to be religious to be able to exercise their moral compass, probably the difference between you and them is they themselves may not have that ability to tap into their inner likeness of God. Is that a simple way to put it that could be that you would consider a correct way
um,
to explain that?
I would say, first of all, as a believing person, believing we're all created in the image of God, I think everyone does have a moral compass. And even if you deny it, to a certain extent, it's still there. It's part of you. You were created in the image of God. And therefore, however much you might say, I don't believe in God, I don't believe I was created in his image, I reject religion, you're still created in the image of God. You still have that moral potential. That's why most
Mhm.
people, most of the time, do not engage in violence. Many people do many good things, even despite perhaps professing not to believe in God. That's
Yes.
because I would say they are created in the image of God, whatever they profess to believe. Religion grounds that, maybe it helps you to take that further and to deal with conflict. Because the problem comes when you have self-interest conflicting with the interest of being good. And that happens the whole time.
Oh
What
wow. Oh,
happens
wow.
if you're very tempted to do something that's going to be in your great interest, and it's going to be to the detriment of someone else?
Yeah.
So how can you, so if you have religion, it's easier in
Yes.
terms of
Yes.
accountability and retribution, etc. And the fact that you are programmed to be good, to justify that and to be motivated by that. Whereas if you don't have any religion, there's no one watching and no one requiring you. So how do you deal with temptation and conflict when you're very powerfully motivated to do something that's very bad? So how do you
Oh
stop
wow.
yourself? How are you going to stop yourself without religion?
Oh wow. Oh, wow. Okay, I think I get it now. So there's a question I want to ask you. I've been working towards this question for now, for some time now since we've been conversing. So you said you approach religion analytically, sorry. And so I wanted to ask you, has your faith ever been challenged? Having you when you are since you've been approaching religion analytically.
Um, the answer is no. The answer is really not at all.
Oh wow.
And maybe that's and I've I haven't had the easiest life always. I've had challenges, health challenges. I've suffered a lot of migraines, for example. I mean,
Yes.
fortunately, thank God, my life is generally very good. I'm very thankful for everything. But
Yes.
when anything has gone wrong, no, I haven't. I usually seek to, whenever something goes wrong, to me primarily, but also to other people. Like my wife says, I start theologizing. Why is this happening to him? Why is this happening to them? And when something bad happens, I usually try, particularly myself, primarily that's what I should be doing, trying to understand what have I done wrong? Why is this happening to me rationally? What is God doing to me? This has happened for a reason. Now, yeah, there are big questions. We have the Holocaust, and the Jewish people, we have the Holocaust. So
Yes.
many people, that is a challenge of faith. How could God allow this to happen? And um, ultimately, you have to. Um, for me, it's not been a challenge. I've never been but it's painful. But ultimately, you have to come to a belief in a higher good and I think another dimension to life. When you see people who've
Yes.
just suffered, I think that forces you. You have to. I mean, and that's an essential part of religion, is that there is a higher world. There's the world to come. And
Oh, okay.
Jewish is called the Olam Haba, the world that is going to come. And in Jewish religion, very much that's almost the main world. That's our main focus. This world is really a preparation for the world to come.
Mm.
And that's where all the answers. Now, people, secularists, dismiss that. That's just like semantics, or not just semantics. It's like just using a rhetorical creation, intellectual creation to justify suffering. It just becomes a convenient way of rationalizing suffering. There's another dimension where suffering will be relieved. Um,
Yeah.
that is
So
essentially the response.
how do you usually dispute that when people say that? Because I've gotten okay, where I live, for example, in West Africa, there there are different kinds of theological doctrinal practices
Hmm.
here. Now,
Hmm.
but there are two major people that I usually come in contact with and try to like rationalize their belief. There's I
Hmm.
don't know if you're familiar with the Jehovah's Witnesses. Definitely you would be familiar with them for
I've heard
sure.
of them. Yeah, I've heard of them. Sure.
Okay. Then there are the Pentecostals.
Right.
And
It's a
the
Christian. It's a Christian sect. Yeah.
Yes, yes. So the Christians now believe for a fact that we are all going to leave this earth and go to heaven.
Right.
The Jehovah's Witnesses, their belief is only about 114,000 people thereabout, according to the Bible, will
Hmm.
go to heaven. The rest of us are going to remain here. Those of them in heaven
Remain
are
here.
going
But
to
what do
be
you mean
like,
remain here? But everyone dies.
yeah, according to what they're saying, when everyone dies, we're going to be reborn in our perfect nature, and the world is going to be renewed in
Mhm.
perfection, and we're essentially going to live here. So there was a time I asked one of the Pentecostals, okay, if we are going to leave this planet, what is going to happen to the earth essentially? Is it going to be left behind, or will it just be empty and only the animals will be left here? So what is your take on these two beliefs, and how would you merge them
Um,
together? Or do you have your own particular belief?
well, we have in our religious texts many sources that discuss that. What will be the end of days? What will be the world to come? What will be the revival of the dead, the resurrection are of all of mankind? What will that involve? And there are a lot of discussions about it, and there's actually a lot of different opinions about it. And there was a great scholar, medieval scholar, very famous, called Maimonides, the Rambam. I don't know if you've ever heard of him, about the 11th century. Maimonides. He was famous even amongst the, not just in the Jewish world. He was a great physician, a great philosopher, a great um, legalist. He's called the codifier. And
Oh
he
wow.
writes, he discusses it in his great monumental code of everything, of all the Jewish works. He really writes a summary of everything. And he discusses the world to come and these issues, the revival of the dead. Um, and he says nobody really knows for sure. And the Talmud also says that certain aspects of it we don't know. Will the world to come be fundamentally like this world? But just for example, there'll be no more persecution. There'll be no more
Yes.
anti-Semitism? That's the point of view of the
Yes.
Jews. That's something we look forward to. But essentially, the world will still be functioning as it is. Or no, will the world and actually as we know it, will all the natural laws themselves evolve to something on a far higher level, spiritual level, and will all the good people will be left, the righteous people will be left, and the non-righteous people will no longer be there. Will Israel be there? Will the non-Israel, sorry, be there? There's many
Yes.
discussion. Therefore, I don't really have a one view of how exactly it will because there are far greater people that have discussed this. But I do have
Mm.
a an opinion as to the concept of the world to come, which was the beginning of your question, and it's quite deep. I don't know if you want to hear about that. It's because,
Of course.
in my opinion, that's really the essence of almost everything. Um,
Yes.
Essentially, it's like this. It's how I don't know how deep we should go. We can go, or how I can go. But
Mm.
it essentially depends on how we look at this world. It starts with that, how we actually view this world. Science views this world as something very stable and very as a fundamental entity that is a material world. It's here, you've got your table, you got whatever it is, you clap, it's here, I'm here. There's reality, there's physical reality, there's material reality, there's the physical forces, and they all work together to create a very corporeal, physical, material world that's stable and exists. That's one way of viewing the world.
Yes.
I maintain that monotheism, the Jewish religion, fundamentally views the world as slightly different. As essentially, it's to a certain extent an illusion. It's an illusion, a divinely created illusion. The laws
Oh
are
wow.
not just, God didn't just create the world and then it exists of itself. If the world exists, it's because God maintains the world. God allows the world to continue to exist. And it's God constantly inputting the creative impulse into the world. That's what enables the world to exist and to carry on existing. And all the laws of nature do not exist independently of God's will. God is constantly willing, so to speak, the world to continue existing. So if you think about that, creates two fundamentally different views of the world. Is the world something that fundamentally independently has its own significance and existence? Or no, it's really a projection of God's will the whole time. Do you understand the distinction I'm making? Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, actually. Oh wow.
So that has fundamental importance for everything, so many things. But I'll just take the one why I brought it in this conversation we're having when you think we speak about the world to come. The world to come, the next world, the revival there, wherever it goes, when we meet, for example, all the souls of everyone who's deceased, is that a different place, a different dimension, a different existence to this world? So if you view this world as fundamentally material, materialistic, and having an independent material existence, so then the world of spiritual world, God's world, so to speak, the world beyond, is completely different, unrelated place. So that would justify, that would explain at least the worldview that you can't speak meaningfully about the world to come because it's a different dimension, it's something different, and therefore it's not relevant to our lives. But if you take the what I believe is the religious and the true view of the world, that fundamentally it doesn't have an independent existence. It's God's will. And therefore, the material world is to a certain extent an illusion. It's really a projection, like I said, of God's will. Therefore, the transition from this world to the next is not really a completely different dimension. It's just experiencing God's will, perhaps in a slightly altered state. But it's
Oh
not
wow.
because it's all part of God's essence. It's just in the form of the physical world that God allows to exist. And then when you leave that world, it's in the form of the spiritual world. That's why the world to come does exist and is very much a part of existence.
Okay. I think I understand. So essentially, it's just like this. To put it simply, what we are experiencing right now is a physical plane, and that is the world we are living in. So when the world to come finally arrives, or when it finally comes, it's going to be the spiritual world. You understand? I think that's what you mean. And we're now going to experience it in a spiritual level. Because I can tell you for a fact that not every single, if there are 8 billion people on this planet, it's probably just a million people that have been able to, tap into their spirituality, if I'm not mistaken. The rest of us are purely physical beings and we just do purely physical things. Most people, most people are even like, the concept of spirituality is foreign to them. It's
Hmm.
alien to them. They can't even fathom nor try to rationalize or try to understand or even not to talk of trying to experience it or tap into it. So essentially, so I think I was able to understand exactly what you're trying to say. Yes. So
The
I want
world
to
of
move on
spiritual.
to,
Yeah, I would just add to that because it's very important. I think that's almost a problematic conceptualization of it. Saying there's the spiritual and the physical. I believe that really the spiritual, actual fact, means the moral, the ethical. Serving
oh wow.
God ultimately means it's a deep conversation. I'm not going to get into too much, but
Mm.
the bottom
Okay.
line of a lot of it is being a good person, sacrificing your self-interest for someone else. That doesn't mean killing yourself and lying down on the road and
Of
being run
course.
over.
Of
It
course
means,
not.
but
Of course
essentially
not.
prioritizing being good for other people. That is spirituality. Therefore, you don't have to have
Mm.
some transcendental psychedelic experience to be spiritual. That's not what it means. Being spiritual means every time a mother wakes up in the night for her child, which happened to us many times. Our mothers woke up in the night for us, otherwise we wouldn't be here. That
Yes,
is
definitely.
very much a spiritual act because it's more comfortable. I often, I have to say, slept in when my wife went to look after the children because she was maybe I would say more spiritual than me. She
Yes.
prioritized looking after the
Yes.
children
Yes, actually.
and that's a sacrifice. That's a spiritual act. That is the essence of a spiritual act. It's sacrificing your spirit, your material comfort for a spiritual end, for the end of being good to someone else. That is the essence of it. And therefore, everyone can and does experience spirituality on a very profound way. Just because you don't have a psychedelic experience or you don't see God in colors and the fires and the bells, whatever it is, that doesn't mean you're not spiritual. And that shouldn't be an excuse for saying I can't be spiritual. No, be a good person. That is the essence of being spiritual.
Oh wow. I love that concept so much. Thank you so much for that submission, Daniel. That's just wonderful.
Okay.
So there's this question I want to ask. You've lived through intense social and political division. Do
Yeah.
you think religious misunderstanding contributes to this polarization?
Yes. You're talking in Israel or generally? You're talking in Israel. You
I'm
said I've
talking
lived through. Yeah.
I'm talking generally because I believe whatever goes on basically, let's be honest with ourselves. We have this world is not multipolar. It has three polars. The US, Russia, and China. That's just the truth. These three countries or these three nations, to a large extent, determine what the rest of the future of humanity might probably look like. That's my personal belief.
Who? U.S.,
So
China, and who's the third one? Europe.
Russia.
Russia. What about Europe?
I think well, right now, what is going on in Europe with the Muslims, and it's just, I think it's falling off, kind of, if I'm not mistaken. I'm open to be corrected, of course, but we all have seen so far, at least from the news and the internet. I think
Yeah.
it's just China because those are the nations that are still, how will I put it, they're still holding to their nationality, if you will. China, Russia, and America, they are still they're still like, they're still holding on to their nationality strongly. Europe, on the other hand, you see things like Europeans, especially in the UK, and many people are running away from the UK. They're leaving England, leaving Scotland. I mean, for example, you left Scotland, so I
Yeah.
don't know if that counts.
That was
So
for
I mean,
religious
of course,
reasons. Yeah, well,
yes,
when I left, it wasn't so uncomfortable. I left to get to lead a religious life. That's really in Israel. That's where.
yes. I understand. I understand. I'm just like citing an example.
So,
If
are you
you, I
saying
don't
that
mean
the
to.
nations in Europe are disintegrating because of all the problems with immigration and other things in society? You're saying the nations themselves are disintegrating. Is that what you're
Yes.
saying?
And
Yeah.
that's what I think. I'm very much ready to be corrected, but that's what I think with everything I've seen on the news and on the internet. That's why I think it might be going on. But
Yeah.
what's your take on the matter?
That's quite a broad question. There's a major. I mean, I think that's a lot of the conflict and division in society is over that question in America and in Europe. It's a fight for the nation to a certain extent. If you talk between the progressive camp and the conservative camp,
Yes,
the general, the right and the political right and the left or the radical left. Generally, the political right is more patriotic. They're fighting for the nation. And they view with alarm, the most famous advocate of that is Douglas Murray, the famous Douglas Murray. Don't know if you've come across him.
I haven't. I'm so
You
sorry.
haven't?
I'm not that
Okay.
exposed. I'll try my
Okay.
best to read more.
Okay, great. No, he's on. He's always being interviewed. He's very pro-Israel and pro the Jews actually, and he's also
Okay.
very pro. He's English, and he sees. He's written a book, I think, even about the what you're saying. Book about what you're saying, the destruction of Europe. I think he calls it the surprise destruction of Europe or something like that. He says, why is Europe disintegrating the way it is? And he attributes it largely to immigration. I think it's more than that. I think it's a disintegration of values to a certain extent. Um, Patriotism, I could get into that a little bit. I think the essence of everything, like I've started to allude to, is ethics, is compassion, is being a good person.
Yes.
And for society to survive, it has to be a commitment between everyone to be good and to worry about the welfare of everyone else.
Yes. So
Um,
you think essentially that particular aspect of society is disintegrating, and it is what is leading to the supposed
yes.
destruction of Europe, if you will.
Yes. Because unfortunately, society's become more materialistic. People have become less spiritual, which means more self-centered, more self-concerned about themselves
Yes.
and their own physical wants. And it's the success, ironically, of democracy. That's what I try to explain.
Yes. Yes.
That has
Yes,
brought
I
about
understand.
that. The great material successes of democracy in the last 500 years, from the Renaissance to all the technological and scientific and political developments, sociological developments that have given such success, but that have also created a tremendous materialism, which has
Yes.
resulted in concern with oneself, focusing on oneself, and therefore there's less focus on an individual level for the benefit of society. We're less ethical. And therefore, that's why nations are disintegrating, because there's less commitment to the welfare of the nation. Your question was the misunderstanding between religious and non-religious.
Yes. The question was, do you think religion contributes to this polarization?
Um, I don't think I think the conflict between part of the conflict is between religion and belief and non-belief. I attribute the responsibility for it to the non-believers because I think non-belief is a non-belief. I argue it's a non-belief in ethics. It's a lack of belief in compassion. It's more belief in actualizing and manifesting myself, my own personal egocentric self to the best extent. Whereas religion places the emphasis on being the best person I can for everyone else.
Oh,
And,
that's
and, and
wonderful.
that's the problem, and that's the tension it creates. It's a deep um, explanation as to why that is, but yeah, I think most of the division is ultimately about around religious belief or non-religious belief. What is man really? Is man there for himself, or is man there fundamentally for everyone else?
Go on. So I want us to take a little bit of a breather. I have
Sure.
rapid fire questions I want to ask you. So you can
Um,
either answer with a phrase or a sentence. So the first one is faith or reason.
there's no contradiction. They're both the same.
Oh, okay. So the second one is tradition or modernity.
Well, I'm from the traditional camp. But we live in a modern world, so we do have to adapt, but that doesn't mean sacrificing tradition
Yes.
in any
So a
way.
combination of the of both, essentially.
We live in a world, I have computers and phones and cars, which we didn't have, so I have to learn how to use them appropriately. But
Yes.
within
Yes.
my great grandparents didn't have these, so tradition, I have to adapt tradition. The principles of
Okay.
tradition have to be adapted.
Okay. So debate or dialogue.
Respectful debate.
Okay. Okay. Free will or determinism.
Well, that's the big argument. Religion believes in free will. Non-religion believes we're deterministic, materialistic beings, and we have a limited free choice. So that's the argument. So as religious, I believe, of course, we have free will.
Oh, beautiful. So now most people say religion is not primarily about belief. It is about behavior or becoming. And like you said, you've explained it here that being religious, which in essence means being spiritual, is about your behavior and
Hmm.
how essentially how you express yourself on this earth. I mean, somebody who's destructive, evil, and vile, definitely that person is not spiritual. And by extension, such a person will not be religious. So is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, you're saying belief or practice. That was what I think that was the headline of your question, and it's both to a certain extent.
Yes.
I'll say very briefly, belief is belief in a God that created the world. So my understanding, that's the source of all morality. If you don't believe in that,
Yes.
then you don't believe in your own morality.
Oh, oh wow.
Therefore, you have to have belief to be a better person. Ultimately, the goal is to be a better person. But you
Yes.
have to have part of it has to be founded on belief. That doesn't mean not everyone who doesn't believe is a bad person, etc., and vice versa. But
Yes.
generally, being good comes from or is dependent on or is enhanced by belief.
Oh, oh wow. So thank you. This is my final question for today before we round up for the interview.
Great.
So if the world becomes more fundamentally rational with regards to your book, what do you think would change first? Politics, religion, or the individual?
Um, I think it would start with individual because I think everything depends on the individual. I think politics and religion really come, well, religion is again comes from God, but we would affect religion on an individual level. It starts with we have to be a better person. It always starts with the individual, not
Yes.
with activism or ideology. It starts with being a good person based on the right beliefs.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much, Daniel, for coming on the
Thank you very
podcast.
much, Blessed.
Yes,
Been
this has
great.
been an incredibly intense, insightful,
I
and
hope so.
exciting conversation.
I hope it
I was
was
so
useful. I hope I
fantastic.
gave good answers. I'm sure I'll look
Definitely.
back at it and say I could have said something much different and better, but
Yeah.
that's okay. That's part of the
Yes,
experience.
we at the beginning of the show, towards the middle of the show, we said at the end of the day, we are only human. And like you said, we are all open to learn, to get better at what we do. It was such a
Yeah.
pleasure to host you. I really loved your perspective on all the questions I asked, and I've learned a lot from you today. And I would
Um,
really love to do this again some other time,
okay.
whenever you're opportune. And thank you so
Okay.
much for coming to
Thank
my
you
podcast.
so much, Blessed. Thank you for having me on. Thank you for giving me the
Yes.
time, for being such a
And
gracious
before
host.
Yes, before we go, can you please tell my audience where they can learn more about your work and possibly connect with you?
Um, I was meant to create a website. I didn't really do it yet. Somebody
Okay,
has done a bit of, I think they put up a page even on Facebook. I don't really go there. Religious, they were not meant to engage too much with online. So I don't really, I have a book. The book has been published on Amazon. If you look for Beyond Power, it's called. It's called Beyond
okay,
Power. It's on Amazon. That's the
okay,
best way to learn about me. There's not that much about me out there right now. The book is there, and I don't know. Maybe I don't know. Maybe I have to put something out there. I don't know. I have to
okay,
consult with my rabbis. What's appropriate?
okay. Such a humble man. Thank you so much, Daniel.
Thank
It's
you
really
very
been a
much,
pleasure.
Blessed. Thank
It's
you. It's
been a
been great.
pleasure. It's been a pleasure to host you. Do have a wonderful day and please take care of yourself.
You too. Thank you. In regards to all
Thank
your
you.
viewers, thank you so much. Bye bye. Take care.
Bye.
Bye bye. Bye bye.